Hello and welcome to In Conservation with. My name is David Lindo, also known as the Urban Birder. And I must say this, I always forget, we are sponsored. Yes, we're sponsored by Kawa Sporting Optics, and they are the manufacturer of the world famous and renowned Promenade spotting scopes. So that's one thing. And also Birds, Wildlife and Nature, and they are the tour company that strives to deliver the best of birding and wildlife watching opportunities around the world. So try and get on to see them in terms of booking onto a tour, because often I might be leading it as well. Anyway, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my guest, who is Maya Bambrick. Maya and I go back a long way. I think I first met you as a child. Well, not a child. That sounds a bit weird. I met you as a younger woman. In fact, why don't you tell us, Maya, how are you and where are you?
I'm brilliant, thank you very much. I'm currently in Bournemouth, in Dorset, in the south of the UK. It's a lovely sunny day. I've been out on a boat this morning looking at ospreys and lots of different birds. So yeah, it's been a fantastic day so far. How are you, David?
You know what? I'm not too bad, but let me ask you, how long have I known you?
I'm trying to think. It was so I think we first met on these calls back in lockdown, and then we met up at Pagham Harbour. And that was 2021, 2022, maybe. Might be even before that. So yeah, quite a while ago. Seems quite a while ago anyway.
And also, I mean, you've been quite connected to In Conservation with, in that A, along with my good friend Claire Evans, who I think is here today in the live audience, um, you, along with her, were very instrumental in helping. In fact, instrumental, you were helping big time with the audience managing even, because in those days, back in the sort of pandemic days, when we used to have large crowds of people coming to watch these Zoom interviews. So you yourself hosted 3 episodes of In Conservation with, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that actually. But yeah, it was fantastic. It gave me lots of opportunities to meet lots of people and then to be able to, be in your shoes and interview. I think it was 3 people, including Indy Kimmel Green, who is a fantastic young conservationist. I can't remember who the other 2 were now, but
Lucy
yeah,
Lapwing,
Lucy Lapwing. It was a few years ago.
yeah, there's someone else, yeah. And
But yeah, it's a great opportunity to practice my interviewing skills.
yeah, no disrespect to the third person that was
No.
on. I can't remember her name. Just to fill you in regarding Maya, in case you haven't sort of come across her before, she's a passionate naturalist, birder, presenter, and writer who is dedicated to making nature more accessible and engaging for all. Currently studying ecology and wildlife conservation at Bournemouth University, a lovely area of the world. She also works as an engagement and projects assistant at Birds of Poole Harbour, which is in Dorset, England, a local conservation charity. You are a regular contributor. I mean, by the way, your CV, your biog sounds amazing for a woman of your tender years. A regular contributor of the Guardian Country Diary, Maya has also presented her own documentaries, including her latest, which is Conservation: The Next Generation, and has featured on BBC Radio 4's Tweet of the Day in 2023. She was awarded Young Ornithologist of the Year by the British Trust for Ornithology, which is an achievement. Driven by a commitment to engaging young people in nature and birding, Maya collaborates with conservation organisations like the BTO and the Cameron Bespoke Trust to create inclusive and accessible opportunities for aspiring naturalists. In her spare time, she shares her passion through social media, using platforms to inspire new audiences and encourage a love for wildlife. So, very commendable stuff there. What I do know is that prior to all of this, you were very much into your dancing, weren't you?
Yeah, that's right. So it wasn't kind of the traditional route into birding or wildlife, but kind of before I got really into kind of nature, I was really big on street dance. So that was my big thing. Like every weekend, I'll be doing street dance classes. Used to be part of like a it's called Urban City street dance crew. We used to do performances in sort of the local area, and sort of got into music through that as well. But yeah, then I sort of switched over, as you do, to birding, wildlife photography, bird ringing, and it kind of developed from there, really.
But do you still have a little dance now and again?
Oh,
You gotta have a
on
dance around
and
the
out
kitchen now and
maybe.
again. Huh?
Not as kind of choreographed as back then, but yeah, maybe do like a bit of a dance sometimes.
And when you say street dancing, break that down. Break that down. Is that break dancing?
That is breakdancing. So I used to deal with sort of body popping and that isolation, that kind of thing. Not the floor stuff. That was sort of beyond my expertise.
Oh, you can do a bit of body popping.
Yeah, not on camera, but
Oh, well, I'll have to, yeah, because I've always fancied doing that, but
It's good
I think
fun.
I don't think my body is as pliable as it once was.
Well, you never know.
I think, excuse me, I think, well, you got a little presentation about yourself.
Hmm,
Maybe let's start with that because
sure.
then, I can ask a few more pertinent questions. Um, so yeah, let's learn more about Maya Bambrick. And while she's setting up, just want to say, if you're watching this in the future on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to tell everyone about it in terms of what you saw and all the possible uh, episodes of In Conservation with that you can actually see. And I always say, tell the people you don't like as well, because they may become nice people after watching it. Over to you, Maya.
Thank you very much, David. So yeah, I thought I'd do like a little presentation just to kind of introduce myself and some of the work I've been involved with and kind of some of my key aims as well. So inspiring the next generation, that's what I'm all about. Um, and I mean, David, thank you very much for that lovely introduction. But a little bit more. I'm a youth representative for the BTO, the British Trust for Ornithology, which means I kind of set up events, try and get as many young people into birding. And I'll tell you a bit more about that later. I'm also working since last April for a fantastic local conservation charity down here in Dorset called Birds of Poole Harbour. And yeah, have good fun doing that. I'm a nature writer, so my spare time, as David was saying, write for the Guardian's Country Diary, but also I've written for Birdwatcher magazine, quite a few different magazines. I used to write my own blog. Also a presenter. So recently, I mean, for the last few years, I've been creating my own sort of short videos, kind of since lockdown that got me into it, COVID. I was quite bored and wanted something to do, so I thought I'll start creating my own videos. And you can see all of those on my YouTube channel, some of them better than others. I'm also a trainee bird ringer, so I've been ringing now for the last kind of 8 years in different places, learning more about birds quite in depth. And also, I'm in the final semester of my ecology and wildlife conservation degree down here in Bournemouth. So I'm just kind of finishing writing, well, in the middle of writing my dissertation, which is on nightjars, as well as all assignments and exams to look forward to. So I like to keep myself busy. But these are some embarrassing pictures of myself of the past. So I've been into wildlife for quite a while. So as David was saying, I used to be quite big into street dance. So I grew up in an urban town in the south of England called Crawley, which is near Gatwick Airport. None of my friends or family are particularly into nature. My grandparents are kind of into gardening and being generally outdoors, but no one was really sort of into birding or wildlife. So it was kind of a random interest to get into, really. It was a program called BBC Springwatch that kind of inspired me. So my mum put it on one evening to try and entertain me. And seeing all the wildlife there, I didn't realize we had here in Britain, really kind of inspired me to think, I'd like to go outdoors and actually see this for myself. So then I kind of visited my local nature reserve. Thought, this is amazing thing, seeing things like kingfishers, great spotted woodpeckers. There's lots of people in the hides at my local nature reserve, which were very helpful, would tell me what the birds were. And also, I got into photography at that time. So got my first little bridge camera, and then I got lots of tips from the, local birders and photographers. And that's kind of how I got into it. And it's grown a lot from there. So now I spend most of my time doing something wildlife related. It's given me lots of opportunities. And now, as I'm getting a bit older, I want to try and get as many young people as possible into wildlife and in conservation as well. So, as I've kind of developed that interest in nature and conservation, it's allowed me to sort of work with different organisations, but also, having come from sort of a more of a disadvantaged background, my mum's a single parent, and being able to see, conservation is a very hard sector to get into. It's really sort of inspired me and motivated me to try and do my best to, get more young people into it, but also make it more accessible for others. So, my mission for the last few years through various media platforms has been to combat stereotypes. So, in birding, it's getting better. It has done in the last 10 years I've been into it. It's still quite heavily male dominated. There's still, lacks young people into it as well. Try and be a role model as well, particularly for, younger women in the sector, to try and create accessible opportunities, whether that, be inclusive, appreciate people's, transport links and money they might not have, and also to try and inspire and influence people. So, try and get more people into it, but also make them aware of different conservation issues and just show them, how amazing our wildlife is here in the UK. But over the years, I realised that getting into conservation as sort of a field, it's now my job, but also, my degree. I've noticed by also speaking to lots and lots of other young people that I've connected with on social media and various groups, that there are lots of things, in the way stopping sort of younger generations and people in general getting into conservation and burden as well. So whether that be money, it's quite an expensive hobby. That goes alongside equipment as well to be able to, afford a pair of binoculars, be able to afford a scope. It's heavily dependent on volunteering. So if you want to make it your job, um, you're expected to have an amount of volunteering experience, and volunteering is a privilege. It comes with privilege to be able to work for free, and not many other sectors expect you to have that amount of experience already before you get your first job. Transport as well. Even though, there are many fantastic urban birding locations around the world, many, reserves which might have been on TV and people want to go and visit are often quite difficult to get to by, public transport. Intimidation. So, I remember my first kind of introductions into different ornithological societies and birding groups. It was predominantly, older men. And as a, 16-year-old girl, that was quite intimidating, joining that, getting involved with that. That was quite an intimidating thing. Also stereotypes. There is, a stereotype when it comes to birding and growing up. I remember at school being a bit afraid to tell people because, thought it might not be cool. It's a bit nerdy, but now I don't really care about that. But I think, yeah, that is getting better. Also, safety concerns. So being out, particularly, as a young woman, being out and about nature reserves or in the middle of nowhere looking for a species or something, it can be, there can be safety concerns being on your own. in quite a secluded area can come with a lot of worry. But also, limited support as well, particularly for young people getting into the conservation world. Sometimes, you need a bit of help or internships and things like that to kind of introduce you and offer you, paid work to be able to introduce you into the world of conservation. So, it's not easy to get into, as a young person, to get into conservation and birding. There are quite a few barriers in the way. But I will say, on a positive spin to that, that from getting into it when I was about, 10 years old and now, 22 years old, I've noticed that there is a lot of improvements and there's a lot more organisations waking up to the fact that they need the next generation involved. They need to hear those youth voices. So yeah, it is seeing an improvement. So I'll just talk about a little bit about some of the organisations I've kind of worked with over the years. So the Cameron Bespoker Trust, they're quite a local charity based down in Winchester, down in the south coast of England. And they inspire young people to connect with nature. So back in 2022, I became a young ambassador for them. Trying to get as many people aware of them as a charity. But what they do is they fundraise, they sponsor lots of events to try and get more people into wildlife. So one of my earliest kind of memories of wildlife, where I first sort of met other young people, was an event run by the BTO, so the British Trust for Ornithology, called Bird Camps. So they were residential. They still run now in all four countries of the UK. They're residential events up in Norfolk. They were back then, and you could go for a weekend. The Cameron Bespoker Trust would sponsor you, so you wouldn't have to pay anything. You go there for the weekend, meet all these young people interested in wildlife, go bird ringing, do some nest recording, meet other kind of inspirational people in the conservation and birding world. And it was just a fantastic place to, meet those like-minded people. And the Cameron Bespoker Trust, sponsored that. They also now, you can see on the top left, they have a residential cottage in the New Forest, which is a fantastic place for wildlife. It's a national park down here in England. And it's based in an RSPB reserve called Franchises Lodge, which is not open to the public yet. But youth groups, people from inner cities, university groups, and go and stay in the cottage, be surrounded by wildlife, and go for walks, hear things like goshawks and all different species of birds, but also just have that tranquility of nature all around you. And that is called Cameron Cottage. So I've been quite involved with, getting people involved with that cottage, but also their work in general. And the film that David was talking about, Conservation, the Next Generation, was very kindly sponsored by the Cameron Bespoker Trust. So they fund young people if they've got projects they want to do and they need a bit of funding. They also fund those kind of things as well. So they do, really fantastic work. And also last year, so between my second year of uni and my final year, I took what's called a placement year, so a year in industry. And I decided to live back at home, back in Crawley. And I started working for the local wildlife trust, so Sussex Wildlife Trust. And it was internship, but it was very much up to me what I did with that internship. So at the time, they needed someone to develop their youth engagement scheme, and that's what I did. So I helped them with various things to develop a youth engagement scheme for 16 to 25-year-olds. And planned events, led events, but also kind of inputted on their strategy, how as a trust, how they would include more young people and put young people right at the sort of middle of their decision making. And one of my favourite things I did with the trust was to create a youth-led nature reserve in Brighton, called the Deanway. So it was sort of a really kind of urban bit of land sort of in between the backs of people's gardens and a railway line. And it was kind of pushed to one side. Not much had been done with it because it was so urban. But I thought this is a great place to be able to engage young people. It's nice and accessible. There's universities nearby. So what I did, I said, can we make this a youth-led reserve? So allowing the young people from local areas to have a say in what happens there, to lead on events, to do lots of practical conservation work. And it's still going now. So that's been really successful. They're hopefully getting some lottery funding for it as well. But I was able in that job to meet lots of young people, hear their views, but also to help them influence, what the organisation did as a whole, and that's continuing. So that was a real highlight of my placement year last year. And then I've spoken a little bit about the BTO, but they've been a big part of my kind of journey into conservation and into birding. Having sort of been involved with them since the age of 13 when I went to their first bird camp up in Norfolk. But now I'm a youth representative for them, as I mentioned earlier. So the BTO is sort of the biggest bird research organisation here in the UK. They run lots of surveys, so that includes things like bird ringing, breeding bird survey. They also carry out lots of research as well. And a few years ago, they set up kind of a youth department. So trying to get more young people into birding and nature in general. And that is, there's a few members of staff, but it's run predominantly, it's youth led. So there's lots and lots of youth volunteers all around the country, putting on events, planning events, getting young people from the local area involved. And, it's been a success. And we've seen, more and more young people connecting to each other, and, getting those opportunities. So over the last few years, I've been a youth representative now for 3 or 4 years. I've run quite a few events and been involved with sort of wider BTO events as well. So that includes had Chris Packham very kindly come and give a talk to 140 people, young people at Bournemouth University. We also run nightjar walks and talks. We've run kind of birding walks, litter picks, all different events, trying to get people that might be just into the environment and then kind of bring them over to the side of birding and nature while we're there as well. But also, helping out with those sort of bird camps as well, trying to get young people involved. And then kind of more recently, so since last April, I've been working for a local conservation charity called Birds of Poole Harbour. So we're quite small. There's only 6 of us in the team, lots of volunteers and some trustees. But I first kind of heard about Birds of Poole Harbour back in kind of lockdown, and they're doing kind of some Zoom calls about kind of rewilding, reintroductions. And then, so at the end of my kind of placement year, after I'd finished my job at Sussex Wildlife Trust, I was looking for a job over the summer. And I saw a job advertised as an Osprey engagement officer. So trying to get people engaged, the members of the public, also bird watchers, educated, inspired about the local ospreys. And that's because as a charity, ospreys are a bird which have kind of been wiped out by humans, by persecution and egg collecting and poisoning as well, through lots of parts of Europe, but also parts of the UK as well. So as a charity, since 2017, we've been kind of reintroducing translocating ospreys from Scotland, where they're doing quite well, down to Poole Harbour and releasing them into the environment. And now, because of that project, we have a breeding pair of ospreys. So they're the only breeding pair of osprey on the south coast of England. The nearest ones are in Rutland Water, where bird fair is held. And through that kind of job over the summer, I was showing people up. We've got a viewing platform, which is a safe distance away from that osprey nest. Showed about 1,500 people over the summer through our osprey tours and those ospreys. But one of my favourite parts of the job that I do is being able to help on our boat trips. So we take out boats in Poole Harbour, which is the second biggest harbour in the world, biggest in Europe. And we show people and educate people about the local bird life, but also about the amazing amount of nature recovery which is going on kind of locally. Lots of fantastic conservation projects. And I also get to show people things like white-tailed eagles, which are the fourth largest eagle in the world, biggest bird of prey in the UK. You can see on the right-hand side. And they're now back in Poole Harbour. And that's because there's also been a reintroduction programme on the Isle of Wight off the south coast of England, translocating again and bringing down under licence white-tailed eagle juveniles from Scotland onto the Isle of Wight, releasing them. And now, because of that, we have kind of a pair of white-tailed eagles in Poole Harbour. So through that job, yeah, I get to run boat trips. I get to, show people ospreys. I get to take out, we took 1,300 school children from the local area out on boat trips over the winter and showed them, got them excited about greater blackback gulls and herring gulls and little egret, but also white-tailed eagle. So yeah, it's a very rewarding job, and I'm actually staying down here in Dorset and continuing that after I finish university as well. And then away from kind of the jobs that I do and volunteering, I quite big on social media, so I really enjoy making lots of content, and I have done for the last few years. So I'm over on Instagram, like to post my pictures, but also I like creating short little videos, showing people, young women out birding, showing me excited about, different species of wildlife. Also on TikTok as well, and yeah, Blue Sky, not really much X anymore. But yeah, TikTok is a great platform to try and get, a wider audience inspired about the birds that I'm seeing. So that's a big part of what I do as well. So yeah, that's a little rundown on what I've kind of got involved with so far. There's probably things I've forgotten. But yeah, they're my kind of contact details. And then I'm sure you might have any questions, David.
Well, I will have questions, but I must say I'm very proud of you, Maya, because I think you've really, done so much, and you're doing so much, and you will do so much in the future, given your background as well. And I'll qualify that in a second. But did you know that Crawley, as far as I know, has only ever been mentioned once in a record that made it into the top 20?
Really? Oh wow. How do you know that fact?
That's one of my hidden talents, actually. I'm not just watching birds. The song was called it's called Seaside Shuffle, and it's by Terry Dactyl and the Dinosaurs. And
Can't say I know that one.
and they talk about, going to Brighton, but
Mhm.
on the way stopping off at Crawley.
Don't know why they're stopping off in Crawley.
So there you go. You live in a
Oh,
famous
well,
town.
that's a new fact for me.
So I'm going to start at the end, actually, rather than the beginning,
Mm.
'cause I'm going to ask you a few questions. I mean, what will happen once you leave university? What do you want to go? What actually do you want to do when you leave
Yeah.
university?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's difficult to say. I mean, I do have some kind of, big goals, I guess. In the kind of shorter space of time, I will be from middle of May, kind of going full time at my job. So I'll be doing that 40 hours a week. But the last few years it's been full of kind of university, and obviously that comes with lots of work. So there's lots of things that I wanted to kind of do in my spare time. I've had to kind of put that on the back burner a bit. So some of that kind of social media work, the presenting, the writing, had to kind of put to one side over the last couple of years. And I'd like to sort of bring that back again when I finish uni and start my job. I would like to, in the sort of long term, potentially, do some more presenting. So I really, really enjoy making videos. And recently I've kind of formed a bit of a production company with a couple of friends. So they're both filmmakers, and we're making that kind of more official. And we've got lots of ideas for films that we want to make. So the kind of first one was conservation, the next generation, but we want to do lots of wildlife films. We did one which is not out yet about urban birding in Poole Harbour, in and around Poole Harbour. So I'd like to kind of work on that, but also maybe write a book. I've had lots of kind of goals, over the last few years. I always said I wanted to be on TV, but on reflection, not a lot of young people watch TV anymore. So I'd like to kind of make a more effort on things like YouTube and on things like TikTok because you've got to go where the young people are watching, to try and get them involved. So I'd like to work on that. And I do like leading, guiding people on bird walks and things. So I'd like to maybe do a bit more, freelance work, and then kind of see where that takes me. I mean, I've not been to many places around the world to go birding. I was very lucky. Obviously, I went to Colombia a few years back, and a few other places. But I'd like to kind of obviously do a bit of traveling as well. So I'm saving up a bit of money to hopefully, not too long a time to go and see the wildlife of the world as well.
There's a lot to unpack there, actually, because you give me answers for practically all the things I was going to ask you. You are a filmmaker, all right?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So I think it's again superb that you set up a production company. Um, excuse me, you definitely should do that and actually get stuff out there. You want to do more presenting, and you give an answer or the reason for not doing so much on TV, which I didn't expect, which was the fact that most young people are not watching TV because the usual answer I hear and the answer I actually have to give myself is the fact that it's a bit of a mafia out there, especially certainly in Britain with the BBC, for example. They have their people that they use, and that's that. And you
Mhm.
mentioned, for example, Spring Watch, which is obviously one of the big programs on regarding nature on Britain in Britain even. But even they, I get the impression they use younger people,
Mm.
women, and also ethnically diverse people just to tick boxes.
Mhm.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I mean, in the last kind of couple of years, it's always been one of my dreams to be on something like Springwatch. Having, it was one of my big inspirations getting into wildlife. Um, but it's such a hard industry to get into, and as you said, they do pick a few people, and that can obviously be a bit disheartening sometimes. I've tried many things, on Instagram and connecting with people, and I know quite a few people that have been on there or work on the program. But I think it is as an industry, wildlife TV and filmmaking, is really struggling like, over the last few years. And I've heard that from many people, people higher up in the kind of presenting world, that there has been lots of cuts. There's, less opportunities now than ever, and that is because, that's probably because less people are watching TV. They're watching streaming services, and they're watching YouTube, and people are watching, short films rather than sitting in front of the TV and watching TV programs. But I will say it is sometimes it feels a bit impossible to be able to make it onto TV. Not that I'm, ever ruling it out because I would never turn anything down like that. But it's hard to know sometimes what they want from people to kind of make it onto TV. I know obviously you need to have something particular about you, some really kind of interesting passion and something different to kind of make people want you on sort of TV. But yeah, it's a tricky thing to get into.
Well, what I'd say is I wouldn't worry too much about TV because
Mm,
it's not what it's cracked up to be. To be honest, I think
mm,
It's good to get yourself exposure on television because then you can work on that and get more exposure elsewhere because people will come looking for you
Mm.
on your social media platforms. But what I've learned in my short career is that you must never sell yourself out. So you must never, be offered something on television that you don't feel comfortable with.
Mm.
Because that's that's happened to me a couple of times, and I'm quick to say no, I'm not interested. And I think you've got to keep your integrity. It's the most important thing. And I think when you start doing what you're doing in terms of working on, your production company and getting things on online, they come looking for you, and that's the way it should be. Because then you do it on your terms
Mm.
and not on
Yeah,
theirs.
no.
So I think people have this thing as TV is the holy grail, but actually, I learned a long time ago that actually the holy grail is what you do. The holy
Mhm.
grail is what you want to do with your life, and what you're doing already is achieving that. You're reaching out to young people to get them engaged, and I think that is what your goal is, as far as I'm concerned. You talked about. I want to go back about the barriers. I'm interested in the barrier side of it because I like you. I've come from a very working class background,
Mhm.
and I, like you, very unlikely background in terms of getting into nature and things like that. Well, I got into nature, but in terms of being, making it my career, you talk about barriers, and one of the things I've noticed over the years is the whole volunteering thing, because as you touched on, a lot of these organizations want a heck of a lot of experience
Yeah.
for working for nothing sometimes. And
Mhm.
I've met people who work for wildlife trusts. There's one person I met in the Alderney Wildlife Trust who had to pay for herself to get there and then
Yeah.
pay rent
Hmm.
whilst working for pittance. How's that got to, that has to change obviously, but how can anyone expect young people to be involved in nature given the fact that if they did try and get involved, there's a load of walls they have to climb over?
Yeah, I mean, it's over the last few years, obviously, I didn't always realize that conservation would be where I work, but obviously the last few years I have. And, it's been one of my massive frustrations is seeing how difficult it is. I mean, I always think if you look at other sectors, so, quite a few of my friends are not in conservation, they're doing completely different, business or marketing and kind of other sciences. And there's lots of kind of, internships and lots of ways in which are all paid. They pay you. But with conservation, we've kind of just accepted, I think, that, it's normal to expect a young person that maybe has just finished a degree or finished their A levels to have hours and hours of volunteering experience. So, most of the time they'll expect you to have done practical conservation. They might have expected you to, do engagement work, but also, have something different about you. So whether you've, got involved with lots of different organisations. Also, it helps if you're kind of a little bit known as well. Um, and seeing I've had quite a few friends which have graduated last year from Bournemouth University doing the same degree as me, and I've heard from many of them that lots of them have not got a job in conservation yet. Like that is a complete it's so difficult because there's few jobs around. There might be dotted in and around the country. If you don't drive as well, if you haven't got a car, you're kind of out as well. But also, many people can't afford to either work for you're expected to work and just get travel expenses or work for not a lot of money. And then another thing, not just the UK, but which I think is an absolute fraud. Quite a few organisations will expect you to pay to go and volunteer, and that's quite a normal thing. So, quite a few people in their placement year will pay go somewhere abroad to volunteer, which I think is crazy. But in the conservation world at the moment. there is still a real kind of lack of entry level jobs. So, it's either that or you kind of work at Tesco's or something, work at another kind of part-time job, and then make ends meet by then doing some volunteering, getting your experience, and then eventually going for a full-time conservation job. So yeah, it needs to change, and in that documentary that Conservation Next Generation, that's what we were kind of touching on bits of that, on how the sector needs to change, because we are in a biodiversity and climate crisis. We need as many people working in conservation. I know obviously that many of these organisations are charities, so they have got limited funds. But I think if we wanted to make it possible, we could, I think, really.
Do you think actually money is the issue, or do you think if they could do more for
I
in terms of
personally
paying
think,
people?
yeah, I personally think they could do more. Um, I think paying people, at least covering their travel expenses. But I think in a lot of, it's taken advantage of young people who, so desperate for the opportunity, and are, will because of that will be willing to work for free. So I think sometimes it's cheap labor, free labor for them, and that really does need to change.
How do you then encourage young people given those circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, it is tricky, but I think having said that, organisations now, some in particular, are kind of waking up to the fact that they need to start offering sort of apprenticeships, internships, kind of short contract placements. So particularly London Wildlife Trust they've got a really, really good youth engagement scheme. So offering, paid traineeships where young people get experience, whether that be, practical conservation, bird ID, engaging people. And then, obviously other organisations like the RSPB offer their kind of residential internships as well. So, it is getting there, but there still is a lack of those kind of accessible opportunities. And it's kind of being, honest about it. I've talked about it before. But as much as you want young people to be interested, it might not always be a career for them. So I know lots of people where it's just simply their hobby. They do a bit of, volunteering on the side of their full-time job in something completely different. So it might not always be, a lot. If you're going into conservation, you kind of have to accept that you're not going to get paid as much as other people in other sectors, and it's kind of a job out of a love and passion for it. I think that's what you kind of accept when getting into the world of conservation, unless you work your way up and get a higher job where you earn a bit more. I think it's definitely sort of out of passion for it.
It does seem to be another route that I've noticed, which is social media, which you're talking
Mm.
about as well, because I can see there's quite a few people, young people, and ethnically diverse people out there talking about nature, doing little films and garnering quite large followings. And some have taken it to the nth degree and actually are sponsored by various brands. Do you think that, I mean, that would only be a certain percentage of everyone that's interested in nature, but do you think that is the way forward now?
Yeah, so I mean, I get quite a few, young people saying to me, "How do I get a job in conservation? How do I kind of make it?" And I always, kind of say, "Put yourself out there," because when I was younger, I'm not a particularly naturally confident or extroverted person, but because I had such a passion and a determination to kind of get more involved with it and kind of make it my career. I realized that, I had to try and find those opportunities and they wouldn't always come searching for me. So I always say to kind of people that want to get into it, don't be afraid to email people. That's how I started writing for people like Birdwatcher magazine, because I actually emailed them saying, I'm a young bird naturalist. I love writing about the natural world. Can I write you an article? And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But social media now, if you can get a platform on it, comes with so many opportunities. So I always say if you can have a presence online, that will definitely help because first of all, helps with your networking, which in the conservation space is so important to be able to know people. Sometimes it is who you know, not who you know. So that's why it's really important to then be able to connect with other people in the conservation world on those platforms. And I think it's relatively easy to make a video or make a post and put it out on social media. But I think with it, you can then kind of share your passion and your kind of enthusiasm, and that definitely does come out. You can see when people really genuinely excited, and enthused about what they're talking about and are knowledgeable as well. So yeah, it definitely offers a platform, and for me personally, it's been really, really helpful, and not just for opportunities, but also meeting sort of other younger people, sort of with similar passions. So lots of the friends I've got now in and around the country are because of things like Instagram. And back when I was first getting into it, I went on Twitter and met loads of other young birders who are now in conservation or not in conservation. And some of us still talk to this day. So it's got its benefits. Obviously, it's not always good, social media. It can be a bit toxic sometimes. But yeah, it can be quite helpful as a young person getting into conservation.
Are people like the RSPB, the Royal Society for Protection Birds, or British Trust for Ornithology, or other NGOs, are they kind of aware of this whole thing about social media? Are they waking up to that in
Yeah,
terms
no,
of,
I think so.
how to get a message across using young people?
Definitely. I mean, an example. Um, so, TikTok is a massive thing now. I didn't used to like it, but now I can see, why people do like it. Is very engaging. Lots and lots of different creators, short films, but the RSBB have got a TikTok account, and it's got millions and millions of views, and that's because they're doing something different. So they're trying to, their videos sometimes are a bit strange, but it appeals to lots of new people, which are not going to be entertained by a person standing there for a minute talking about a species of bird and then showing a picture. They're actually doing completely new things, using kind of trends, different music of the, which is sort of recent, to be able to put it out to a new generation. And whether those people watching will necessarily, that'll have an influence on them, or engage them, it's probably still quite a small percentage, but they're still making themselves known. So I think, you know, sort of if you look at the big organizations, they're definitely waking up to the fact that, they've put more money into their marketing through social media. And it's, doing them quite well, I think, especially on TikTok for the RSVB.
That's interesting. Do you consider yourself, or would you ever think of leaving the UK for a while and working abroad?
Yeah, no, I would. I mean, I would like to at some point. I think for me, um, I would like to in the next kind of few years, really, to be able to, see more of the world and see different viewpoints and how conservation is done in different places. I think, being able to then, if I decide to continue living in the UK, long term, I think then you can bring it back here and then use that as an influence on your own work and what you're doing. But yeah, I would definitely at some point, I'd love to, particularly, my thing has definitely been engagement work, but obviously general kind of bird conservation, though, both of my passions, but I would like to kind of take that somewhere else and use the skills that I've, learned in the last few years and use them on kind of somewhere abroad, definitely.
If you were a boy, do you think you'd be more successful?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I think it might have been easier. So I think getting into birding conservation would have been easier because when I first sort of got into it, kind of the groups that I was in, people attending things like bird camp and on Twitter, I would say it was like three quarters boys. And as a young girl, that was quite daunting. I think it's definitely, been kind of a bit of a barrier in some way because, as I was saying earlier, I was still worried about going places because of, safety concerns being a young woman. But then, you can look at the flip side of that and thinking, as a young woman in the birding world, I guess, I'm more unique in that way, and that puts me, a greater chance of hopefully then, inspiring people because they can, hopefully look up to me as a role model. Any, young girls out there wanting to get into, similar things as me, and see me, as that role model. So there's, yeah, positives and negatives, I think. But I guess, yeah, it has probably been a bit of a barrier.
And ethnically diverse people.
Hmm.
What's that situation like? Are you seeing when you're helping young people? Are you seeing many of those kind of people? People of color.
No, so there's still, yeah, a real lack of kind of diversity in the birding and conservation world. And again, obviously I can't speak from experience, but having friends that are ethnically diverse in the conservation space and speaking to them, it's those barriers are the same, um, particularly living in urban areas, that kind of access to nature being more difficult, but also that intimidation and, not having a lot of representation, sort of in the media and on social media. And that is why, again, going back to social media, why it can be really useful. So, there's so many, content creators, naturalists, young naturalists, who are ethnically diverse and doing fantastic things to then show, it's very much normal for a young person to be into wildlife, and then hopefully inspiring and showing, some representation. But again, it's going back to those accessibility problems, the fact that, transport's difficult, financing public transport, and equipment and things like that. It all kind of boils down to those kind of barriers. But again, added on top of that is the worry of being in a space where it is predominantly white, and you can feel, quite uncomfortable with that. So yeah, it's difficult, but I think, I can't obviously speak from experience, but I think it is getting a bit better, I think. There's some fantastic kind of organisations, things like Flock Together, um, Young Wilders, some really good kind of organisations and groups of which are doing, a really good job at showing that representation and offering spaces where those people can come together and share their passion. And yeah, so I think there's sort of benefits to that. There are good things happening.
What conservationists and naturalists do you look up to?
Oh, that's a good question. So I guess over the years, I mean, you've been a fantastic inspiration to me. You've helped me a lot of different opportunities and given me some fantastic advice along the way. So I'm always very appreciative for that. Growing up, obviously watching Springwatch, I, was a fan of Chris Packham. He's been quite supportive of me in my career so far. And, seeing that kind of encyclopedic knowledge, I think I was a bit jealous, at some point I want to be like that, to be able to just spill out facts and it comes so easily. And obviously the fact that I hopefully, I want to go into presenting as well. And yeah, so I think there's a few out there, but also not just kind of people on TV, people that I've kind of my bird ringing trainer back home. So I got involved with sort of ringing at 15. And she is part of the local ornithological society in Sussex, which I was a council member of for like 6 years. And she, was a real inspiration for me, a woman in the kind of birding space, which is sort of quite bird ringing, which can be quite again, male dominated, and full of information and support for me. So yeah, people kind of locally, I guess, as well.
Okay. Um, have you a favourite bird?
I do. I would always say the same thing, but it kind of changes. And I do have a bit of a top three. But my sort of all-time favorite has always been sort of kingfisher, and that's because it was one of my, as you say, spark birds. Back when I was like 10, 11 years old at my local nature reserve called Warnham, and I would sit in the hide for hours trying to get a good picture of one. And now, every time you see one, no matter how many times I've seen one over the last few years, you always get so excited every time, even you just hear it. I think, and for people that are getting into wildlife, it is sort of the amazing bright blue and orange bird. I think, yeah, that's definitely my favorite, closely followed by Eurasian nightjar.
Yeah, good birds, good birds. And if you could be anywhere in this world right now, where would you be?
That's a good question. I've got two answers. I mean, down here in Dorset, I'm very, very lucky. It's a lovely part of the world. We've got some fantastic wildlife here, but I would love to go back to Colombia, just because, like it's the most diverse place of birds in the world. It's just absolutely amazing, and I'd like to kind of spend more time there, appreciating what I'm seeing, and see hopefully maybe a harpy eagle and just appreciate all the, extremely colourful birds.
Yeah, I mean, today you haven't even mentioned your knowledge and enthusiasm for all the other forms of natural history, including flora,
Mhm.
because you are all over that. Because I've been out with you before, actually, as you remember last year, the day before
Mhm.
I died of COVID.
Yes.
You took me around a couple of spots in
Mhm.
Dorset, and you were showing me all the plants and other birds, other wildlife as well. So that was pretty cool. Well, I think we've come to a very interesting end to a very interesting hour, and with someone who is an old friend of in conservation with, a young old friend. But thank you, Maya, for sparing your time to talk to us and also spread your enthusiasm. And I wish you all the best for your future endeavors. And I know you're going to be great anyway.
Oh,
But thank you, Maya.
no problem. Thank you very much for having me. It's been nice to be, on the other side of it all.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you on the other side. And Zoomers, thank you very much for checking in, all the people watching live, but live, yeah. But don't forget that if you are watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe and do the usual stuff and tell everyone about it. Thank you for watching In Conservation with. My name is David Lindo, and it's sponsored by Cowa and Birds, Wildlife and Nature. Look forward to seeing you next time, and until then, keep looking up.
Mhm.